Up until now, everything that we've done has been focused on the data itself, not the database. So let's instead have a look at the database and how we can create and manipulate the actual database itself. Things like creating new tables, amending the columns within a table, things like that. Let's imagine that in our fictional restaurant, management has decided to run a training scheme. We've also decided that we're going to use our fancy database to keep track of who has been on the training courses and who hasn't. We're going to need a new table to hold the data. So first off, we're going to create a training course table which lists all of the training courses available within the company. And we do this with the create command. And we're specifically going to create a table. We're going to call our table training, and within the training table we're going to have two columns. Now the way we actually describe the columns that we're going to add in our database within SQL is to just type the name of the table fields that we're going to add. We also type the type of data that we're going to store in that column. So in this case we're going to store a number or an integer. This number is going to be unique. And when we add a new field into our training table, we want it to assign a unique number automatically. So we're going to use auto increment. We also want our course ID to be a unique index for our actual courses. We don't want it to be able to actually have two courses with the same ID number. So we're going to actually define our course ID as being our primary key. We can also add a comment to our table to outline exactly what this field is. So this is the course ID. And as I say, we want to have multiple columns, so we just add a comma and add the detail that we want for our second column. So we want course name in this instance. We want this to be a variable of varchar 50. What a varchar is it means that the name can be any letters or numbers up to 50 letters long. It doesn't necessarily need to be 50, it could be anything from 0 up to 50. If we wanted to specify that it had to be 50, we would just remove the var from the front of this, so it would be 50 characters long. But in our case we want it to be able to be changed. We don't want a specific length for our actual fields. And so if we execute this now, we're going to create our new table. So as you can see at the bottom in our output window, it's created our table for us. So if we create a new query now, we can see our blank table with the two columns that we've created, course ID and course name. We can of course add data into this, just as we have done in the past. And you will notice that I specifically left the course ID out when I was inserting this new value. And that's because we wanted to rely on the database itself to assign a unique ID number to it. If we run this again, we will add another row into the table. And because we've used auto increment when we were actually setting up our table, here the course ID number will increment for us automatically. It's not something that we need to worry about. Now you'll notice that we've only obviously got these two columns here, the course ID and the course name, but we wouldn't be able to actually reference this from our staff table because we wouldn't know which staff have taken part in which course. So we can create another table called staff training, and this is just going to have three columns. We're going to have the staff number, we're going to have the course ID, and we're going to have the date. The staff number is going to be an integer, the course ID is going to be an integer, and the date taken is going to be a date. And we're going to run this, and in our other file we're going to select everything from staff training. We will revisit this table later on when we start to look at the actual architecture of our database in more detail, because what we're going to eventually do is we're going to limit the staff numbers to only be a list of our current staff, and we're going to also limit the course ID to only be a list of the current courses, because staff who don't work here will not be able to take courses that don't exist. And that part of database architecture is very frequently missed out when people are creating, especially smaller projects for websites, for example, because technically this can work without limiting the staff number or the course ID. But by actually enforcing limitations on what can be put in there, other than just any integer, we make our database much more resilient. And the process of doing that is called adding foreign keys into our tables, because as you'll know, the primary key for our training table is the course ID, and the primary key for our staff table is the staff number, and those keys are foreign to this table. But as I say, we'll look at that in a lot more detail when we actually start looking at the database architecture in more detail.